Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully, you had a lot of fun waiting while I tried to get this working. This has been an absolute joy, let me tell you. Excellent. All right, so we can see everything. Let's pop over to me. So, hi, welcome to my little walkthrough of my site and my first experience with streaming, which let me tell you has been super exciting so far. I have literally enjoyed none of this setup time and getting this all configured because the YouTube documentation sucks. Now, that being said, oh boy, do we have some fun. It only took, what, 15 minutes to get everything configured and working and all that good stuff? Oy vey. All right, well, that's fine. We will get underway. So, I do have a bit of an outline, but if you have any questions or anything, feel free to fire away with whatever you'd like, and we can kind of segue around. So, first off, I wanted to talk about just kind of why are we doing this, and then we're going to talk about the site. How does this work? Some features that I think are really, really cool that I think a lot of people don't use or maybe don't know exist. And then I want to transfer over into kind of some fun features of the code, looking at some of the more interesting pieces of color theory. How does a site use it? What does the actual back end of the site look like, administration, that kind of thing, the stuff that you're not going to see normally when you're just using the site. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun. My goal is to end at the hour. So we've got, roughly 45 minutes to see what we can make through. So with that, let's get underway. So first off, who am I? My name is Joe. You can find me on Twitter at FilamentColors. I go by the handle the Filament Librarian, and that's kind of what I do, at least in the 3D printing space. It's a big hobby of mine. It's a hobby that I greatly enjoy, and it's something that I think is really, really important because we don't have anything as a community, as a 3D printing community, like the thing that I help provide. I found a niche that really didn't have anyone supporting it, and I ran with it, and now it's kind of a thing. So a little bit about me. I'm a teacher as my day job. I am also a programmer, and I wrote FilamentColors.XYZ. And that's important because there really is nothing that, as I said, there's nothing that does what this site does. So what I want to do is I want to walk you through kind of what the site is real quick. We're just going to talk about what it is, why it exists, and show off kind of those features. So the first thing, what in the world is this? This is a site that exists specifically to do one thing, and really one thing only. It's to compare colors in a relative fashion between different filaments and different manufacturers, different types of filament, all kinds of different, um, all kinds of different attributes that are boiled down into one single piece. It's what color is it? What does it look like when you print it? And the reason for this is because, well, you can boil it down to one thing. I hate painting. I loathe painting. Painting kind of sucks. So, what I did was I got very frustrated at different websites because different manufacturers, because every manufacturer has their own way of photographing filament, and you really can't you can't blame them for this because everybody's got their own studio, but everybody has different lighting and everybody has different settings and everybody has different filaments in general. So it's really important for me to be able to compare filaments from one manufacturer to another, knowing what they're going to look like when you actually get them. Because when you've got a project that has 3 or 4 or 6 filaments in it, and 5 of them look great together, and one of them looks decidedly not great, it makes the whole thing fall apart. And that's really, really frustrating, and that's really, really expensive after you make that mistake once or twice. So what I've done is I've cataloged every filament that I have ever been able to get my hands on, and this is a lot. So the site as it stands right now has roughly 450 filaments on it. All of them are printed with the exact same file, the exact same settings, and they're all cataloged with using their primary attribute of what color is it? what color do these actually look like? And it's important to remember that the site, one thing that people get confused is that the site doesn't work with real world color. You can't look at, for example, Joel's High Five Blue and see what this is going to look like when you have it in your hands, because people's lighting changes, people's perception changes. But that's why relative color is so powerful. When you compare one picture taken with the same settings to another picture taken with the same settings, if they look good together on the site, they're going to look good together when you have them in your hand, even though they might be a slightly different hue. So that's really why this site is so cool. So the first thing is we have the library. Then we have a filament detail view, which is kind of what I was just in. And the detail view has a couple of interesting things on it. We've got the name, we've got the hex value of the color as the site generates it. This hex value is really only relevant to the site itself, but it's still interesting. We have some general printing help, some general temperatures. If you have some trouble with this filament, these are the settings that I used to make this swatch. I'm not saying that these settings work for everybody, but they definitely work for me. So, that's handy. We have 2 buy links. I try to always have 2 purchase links on every single swatch, and this is actually the only way, one of the only ways, the primary way, that you can help support this site if you want to. Anything that's an Amazon link is always an affiliate link, and I always also try to have a link directly to buy it from the manufacturer, if that's what you prefer. If you don't like Amazon, or it's too expensive to use Amazon where you are, or something like that, then being able to buy directly from the manufacturer is often a really good way, to get around that. Or if you just want to directly support them, this is the best way. So I always try and provide that link for people if they want to use it. Down here, we have the related color section. And because we can calculate the base color of a filament, and I'll get into exactly how that works in a little bit, we can calculate the pure complement of that color. And if you remember from grade school, a complement is just 180 degrees on the color wheel. It's the exact opposite side. And in this case, blue and orange, they work really well together. And what the site does is it searches the entire library, and it pulls out the swatch with the identified color that is closest to what we identify as the pure complement. And generally speaking, with the number of filaments that I have right now, the chances of this being pretty accurate are reasonably good, startlingly good, actually. So down here, we have my favorite button. And this actually isn't as obvious as it could be, but oh man, this is where the real fun starts. More color combinations, because one of the things that the site does is it takes this automatically generated color, and it takes this automatically generated complement. Well, just because we can calculate the complement, we can calculate other color groups as well. So when we click on this, what we end up with is different color schemes that are automatically calculated and automatically populated. So if you're looking for example, rectangular color, then here are 4 colors using the base color that we selected first as the centerpiece, and 3 colors that complement it in this fashion. We also get a little bit of information on how to actually use this or properly use this, and so on and so forth. This leads us to the other really cool thing that I love about this site, and I use like all the time, is collections. So each one of these, you notice, has this button called Open Collection. If we click on this, then what this does is it takes us to a new tab that is just these 4 colors. And this is your opportunity to really see those 4 colors in contrast with each other and see, hey, is this actually going to work for the kinds of things that I want it to work on? This is really cool because you can put whatever the hell you want in this collection, which is really, really neat. The second is that this link that it generates is always valid. One of the things that I was looking at when I was trying to build the site is, how do I want to store user collections? The things that you guys take the time to personally curate and find the colors that you like for your projects. Well, the answer is, I don't want to store that information. I don't want to be liable for that, and I don't want to have to deal with passwords and user hashing, and that's just gross. So instead, this is old school. Bookmarks. This URL will always render these 4 swatches in the same order as long as the website's up. Until the end of time, this website or this URL will continue working as long as the site's up, and it will continue bringing you these specific 4 swatches. So if you find something that you like, you want to send this URL to somebody else, they're going to see the exact same thing. And it's the same thing works. If you save it, you're always going to see this view. And that is super cool. But you don't just have to use the pre-generated collections. And this is something that a lot of people have told me they've never been able to find. When you hover over a swatch, you have this little button in the upper left-hand corner, and that button is available for every single swatch. And if you click on that button, then it throws the site into collection mode. You see we get this little halo around each one, and the card gets slightly smaller when you select it. So let's say we want to find a couple of swatches that we really like. We've got a Blue Wonder Glitter right now. Let's search for some orange. I'm looking for McLaurin orange and, maybe a green. Green Gate. That's helpful, but not really what I was looking for. So let's pull Push Plastic Green. So we see that we have 3 swatches in our queue right now. If we click Create Collection, then we get sent to this collection page with just the pieces that we just created. And this will, you can take this URL, you can send it to other people, you can manipulate it yourself, whatever the hell you want, you've got that available to you. So that's kind of the front end for the site. That's the major functionality. That's the thing that really makes it stand out, and that's why it's really really useful. At least if you print a lot, or if you're trying to find colors that match specifically for a project that you're working on, or match well with each other, or something like that. The pre-made color groups are extremely useful for being able to prototype different different projects, or at least if you're using something like Fusion 360 where you can configure different colors for different parts, then you can see at a glance what your project is going to look like after you print it out using these filaments. And that is super, super cool. So let's talk about math. And in order to talk about math, in order to talk about how we get this color, we need to talk about math, really, is what this boils down to. So when we're looking at these colors, I don't actually put in any of these colors. These are all automatically generated by the website. One of the things that I wanted to do with this site, one of the decisions that I made very early on, is I wanted it to be as automated as possible. The fewer human steps that are involved in the process, and believe me, there are still a lot, the fewer human steps that are involved means the fewer things that can go wrong, and the more I can just set aside and let automation take over. So let's take a look at this one, for example. So we've got this hex color, and we need to get a hex color, but the only thing that we have is an image. So what we actually do is we take 2 source images, and I've actually got some source images that are pulled up here. I'm just going to drop these into a new tab so that I don't have to change how streaming works. But there we go. There's one. So this is a front image. This is straight from the camera after Photoshop. So what I do is I have a little lighting rig that allows me to get even color on everything that I photograph, and then I take these into Photoshop, and I do have a color balanced monitor that I use to help me actually make sure that the filament that I have in my hand closely matches, as close as humanly possible, the filament that I see on screen. Now, I know that not everyone's going to have a color matched monitor. That's simply a pipe dream. So that's why relative color is so great. Even if your monitor displays things a little bit off, everything is going to be the same amount of off, and so it should still even out as long as you have a relatively decent monitor. So when I have this photo, I don't actually do anything to this besides color grade it. That's it. And then here's the back. So here's the other one. So we have our label, and that's basically it. The only thing that I have to do is make sure that the swatch is in the correct place on the sheet, and then I take the pictures. And you notice we've got these black bars at the top and the bottom. This is actually interference from my lighting rig that I haven't managed to get away from, but that's okay because it doesn't really matter. So if we look back at the site, then you notice that our card or our primary image here is actually a lot tighter than the source image that we just looked at. We've got a lot more white space. So what I do is I actually upload these unfinished, uncropped images, and the site crops them. The site crops them for me. So what we end up with is I upload 2, and I end up with 3 images, actually. We end up with the front image, the cropped back image, and then we crop the front one more time. And the second crop for the front is what gets us this little image, the card image here that we see in the library view. And the card image is really important because the card image is what the color is actually based on. What we do is we take the card image, because it's so much smaller, we rip it apart pixel by pixel, sort all of the pixels by color and intensity, and then grab the average of the entire array of pixels. And that is what we use to generate the color that you see here. It's the card image that's been ripped apart and sorted, and that's what we generate this color off of. So the color that you see on the site is actually the color that the picture is uploaded as. And that's what the computer sees, which means that there's so much less room for human error. As I'm uploading these, there's no point where I have to look at a color wheel out on the site side and say, oh, this is, close enough. This is it. All of that color balancing is done in as clean situation as I can in Photoshop early on in the process. So we've got that, but this is a lot of data. So what I wanted to show you, next, I'm going to check and make sure that I haven't actually gotten any new comments on chat, which I haven't, so that's cool. So what I wanted to show you is actually the upload process, because I think that's actually really, really cool. What does this actually look like on the back end? Where are we pulling all this information? Because I don't know about you guys, I am a data nerd. I love data. I love data so much. I think it's a lot of fun. And so what I'm going to do here is this is the actual backend for the site. Believe it or not, this is a Django site. It runs on, it's an entirely Python, and the code is open source. So I am going to poke at a few things in the code here in a little bit, but the code itself is open source. So this is the actual swatch administration side. Thank you, I appreciate that. This is the actual swatch administration side. And so what we've got here is a list of all the manufacturers that we can pull from. We've got the color name, we've got the filament type, and we've got a whole bunch of other things that actually get used for different pieces of the website. So if we're going to add something, I've got this this opportunity here. Make this work. We've got color names. So this is matte fiber gray. This is an HTPLA because that's what Protopasta makes, and the color parent. So for the color parent is actually used on the main site itself. Whoops, it would have helped if I didn't click refresh there, so that's okay. Protopasta, matte, fiber, gray. This is HTPLA, and this is gray. So the color parent is used on the main site when we're looking at the browse by section. So when we browse by color family, it will actually get pulled by this drop down. So if we wanted to search by all grays, which we'll just go and pull that up, then you see that we've got really everything here that has that as a color parent. So if we go back over here, then we can go ahead and start adding some stuff. We've got our front image, which is this one, just double checking before I drag it into place. So we've got our front image, and this is the uncropped image that I showed you earlier. Oh, right here. So we've got the black bars on the top and the bottom. Those will automatically get cropped. So I'm going to move over to the back image. We'll just drop that over there. And we don't actually have to do any of these extra settings. So this is, I do actually have 2 different methods for generating the color. If the fast method fails or generally errors out, then it'll just generate a gray color, which is really not helpful. So I can come back in and use the longer method, which is slightly more advanced, and I really can't explain fully. It's one of those things where it's like, it works, and I don't fully understand why, but it works. So I can also regenerate everything that's automatically generated. So for example, if I need to regenerate the automatically pulled color schemes, then I can flip this switch and just save it. We don't have any notes, but when I refreshed, I lost my handy dandy link. So let's see if I've still got these pulled up. So I have two links, right? I have the ability to add either a manufacturer purchase link or an Amazon link. In this case, I have both, but if I don't have one of these, then the button automatically won't show, which is super, super nice. So all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to grab the link from Amazon here. This is the gray version of Protopasta's matte fiber. So I'm just going to select gray and grab my affiliate link that I had pulled up. There we go. So I have an affiliate purchase link here. I don't have any tags right now because a tag would be used for something where a filament is unavailable or is just straight up not purchasable or anything else that I want to have in here. Because on the site, if you've ever looked at the settings, then we have show unavailable filaments. Now, some people don't want to see filaments that you can't physically buy, for example, the Amazon Basics filament, but I want to have it available as an option for people if they do, in fact, want to use that. So I'm going to pop back over to add swatch. We don't have any tags that we want to add, and the other four things here are just in case I need to do a manual override. I rarely ever have to do this, but it's nice to have the ability to do it if I need to. So I'm just going to go ahead and click add swatch, and in this case, I get that it was added successfully. If we go back to the main page, then we should see, since we're still filtered by gray, we should see it pop up here. But let's look at the library. There it is, matte fiber gray. So it got indexed. We automatically generated a color for it, and something else happened that happened behind the scenes, but we didn't really see it. So I'm going to copy this link over to Firefox here, and what actually happened was the website automatically generated a tweet under my account and went ahead and posted it. So Twitter will take a few minutes to catch up and actually generate the preview image, but this link is valid for the swatch that we just added. And that's how these tweets are created. They're automatically generated by the website. So if we go back over here, we can see that it was added successfully. I did remember to set the color parent correctly, so that's awesome. If we click Save and View, we get sent to the main page. Now that I'm logged in, there are two new buttons that show up on here, and this is one of the parts that's only available in the back end, and that's one of the things that I think would be really interesting to show off. So we've got an Edit button and a log out button. This is one of the things that kind of makes my life easier, especially from an automation perspective. If I ever come into this and I see an error or I see something that needs to be adjusted, I can just click on edit up here and I get immediately dropped into the edit page on the back end specifically for this swatch. Save and view sends me back. This doesn't sound super cool, probably, but it took a surprising amount of effort to implement, so I'm excited about it. I'm going to show it off and talk about it. Sorry, it's just how these things go. So after the upload process, what happens? It gets sent into the library, but there are a couple of other things that happen. Number one is that there is a cache time that I think you might have seen in the upload or in the edit screen here. So we have this date added here, and that will never change, right? That's the actual time and date that I submitted this filament so that it would get added to the library. But the last cache update, that's different. What happens with the last cache update is that it's used to generate the last time that we checked for all of the colors that actually want to go into the families, the color schemes that work with this particular swatch. Now, it would cost a lot of time and energy to redo all of the caches, all of the different color schemes for every single film, especially because we've got 454. So for all 454 swatches, if we wanted to actually regenerate all of these at the same time, then what we would have to do is go through all 454, and we would have to regenerate all 16 or 17 individual color family pieces for each swatch, and then we'd have to save it. That would be ridiculous, and that would be actually really, really computationally expensive. So, of course, we don't do that. Instead, what we do is we save all of the individual elements to the swatch itself. They're just not displayed here on the backend because I don't need to edit them manually. But then we use the last cache update to control what happens when somebody clicks on a swatch since the last time a swatch was uploaded. And that's where it gets really, really cool. So when we're looking at this, if we pull up a swatch on the back end that we haven't clicked on the front end yet. So let's find one that hopefully nobody's clicked on here since we last did it. So let's do Pearl Red. So if we do a search here on the back end for Pearl Red, we should get filament PMs, and we see that the last cache update was March the 5th. So what happens here is that when I click on this element, then it takes just a little bit longer to load. But what it's doing is it's dynamically recalculating everything that appears on this page to make sure that the color that I just uploaded is not a better fit than the ones that we already have selected here. Because who knows, maybe the color that I just uploaded is actually a better fit for one of these color schemes. So we have to redo that. But after we recalculate it, we save the last cache update. So now if I refresh this, we see that the last cache update here has updated to today, just now. And that means that the next time that somebody clicks on this specific color, or if I refresh the page, it loads a lot faster because it doesn't have to recalculate all of those. We can just pull directly from the cache that's stored in the database with all of these colors that we know already work or are as close to the ones that we know work because we've already checked it against the most recent version of the database. And some of these colors, admittedly, some of the colors, the cache is super old because nobody's clicked on it in a few months. But that means that we don't have to spend the actual time and energy recalculating every single swatch because we only need to calculate it when it's called the first time. And that is just the most beneficial use of my server resources, because the server that I run this on is like super underpowered, and it's the most beneficial use of people's time because I can upload new swatches at any time. I don't have to actually take the website down. I don't have to do maintenance mode or anything. I can just upload a swatch and people will see the new swatch as it's uploaded, which is super cool. So, moving from this, I just checked chat. We don't have any new comments. So, moving from this, I want to talk about local development because that's something that I have gotten some questions about. What does it actually look like when I'm working on the site? So, this is the production version of the site, right? We have 454 different colors, but I don't need 454 different colors when I'm working on it on my own time, when I'm just adding features or making sure that things work. So, I want to show kind of what that looks like. So when I'm working on the code, then I actually do have the code pulled up here, but I want to show Whoops, hang on, give me just a second. It says there's an error and it lies. There we go. Okay. So when I'm working on the site, then this is actually the view that I have most often than not, or more often than not. Everything that's on the site is written in Python. It's written as I mentioned earlier, a standard Django server. And the reason for that is because Django is actually my day job. I teach how to use this framework as part of my day job, and it's a lot of fun. It says that's an error. Oh, there we go. I think that's a lot of fun, and I think that Django itself is extremely powerful. And so being able to interact with it and being able to use Django in this manner both allows me to practice, keep my skills sharp, and be able to leverage this incredibly powerful framework that I have access to. So, one of the things that is really cool, I think, is actually what the model looks like behind the scenes. So we have the manufacturer. So if I'm the drop down, if I'm looking at that drop down and trying to figure out, is it protopasta, is it push plastic, so on and so forth. Each one of those is stored in this manufacturer model. And then the really cool one is the swatch. So we've got all of our base color options, we've got manufacturers, we've got filament types. Here are our 3 full-size images. So we actually do store the full-size image for the image front, the back, and sometimes we have an other. So actually what I can do is I can show you the other real quick, because that's not super common. I don't have that very often, but where I do have it is glow in the dark, because sometimes you do need that third image to really show what the filament can do, especially if it has any kind of extra properties. So if it's a glow in the dark or if it's a color change, I try and always show that off and show what that actually looks like, on the back end, well, on the front end, so that you can see, what you're getting into. Some glow in the dark filaments definitely do not behave the way that we expect, and it's important to be able to see kind of what this looks like. Or let's say we've got, glow in the dark orange. This isn't a very bright orange, but it definitely is orange, and that's really cool for people to be able to see kind of what this will look like when they get their hands on it. So anyway, I'm going to pop back over to the code. So we've got the other image, and then we've got all of the color scheme. So when we're actually looking at the color scheme, this information, all of these individual pieces, are other swatches that are saved on each swatch. And from a data management perspective, this is absolutely not the most fantastic idea. But what it is a great idea for is caching. The particular method of caching that we're using, and the particular method of using of caching um, that we're deploying to actually keep track of where all of our filaments are and not have to recalculate all of these on the fly every time that we need them, means that we still need to store them. And that's where caching in general kind of comes into play. So we've got tags, and then we've got the card image. So all of this stuff is calculated on the fly. We also do have the complement hex, which you can see in the admin panel, although I didn't really call attention to it. Now, this is where some of the real fun is. I won't spend too much time on this simply because we are running a little bit behind for where I had planned, but hey, that's okay. This is where the magic happens. Honestly, 100%, this is where the magic happens. So when we're looking at some of these colors, what we're doing is we're actually using 2 different color spaces in order to handle all of this. So we'll kind of skip past image cropping because that's what all this is. But this is actually where we get the hex value of any given swatch or any particular swatch. So what we actually do is, as I mentioned, we pull the image apart pixel by pixel and we sort it, and that's where NumPy and OpenCV really come into play. You may have heard of OpenCV being used in facial recognition software, like open source facial recognition or object recognition. That's something that is really good at it, but it's also really, really good at just generically interacting with images. So what we can do is we can use OpenCV and we can use NumPy in order to first rip the image apart and then also sort everything and kind of put everything in the order that we need to in order to get the actual dominant color. So that is super, super cool. It's also extremely expensive. It's a very, very expensive operation to run, and that's why we run it on the card image, because it's tiny comparatively to the images that get uploaded. The images that get uploaded can be anywhere between 2 and 6 megabytes. The card image usually is about 100K, so it processes much, much faster. Getting the closest color swatch is also something that's super, super important. And this is the first time that we actually deviate away from RGB color space. Now, RGB is what you may be familiar with when we're working with the pound sign in the very beginning and the 6 digits that come after that. Hex color is really, really useful because it allows us to show 16 million different colors, which is far more than we can see really, as kind of a general rule. But RGB in itself is not the best thing when we're looking for computer colors, or really a true representation of color as we see it as humans, because RGB only takes hue into consideration. It does not take intensity into consideration. And for that, we actually have to rely on lab color. Lab color is an alternate color scheme that we can convert to and get a reasonable assumption of what the color actually is by starting from the RGB and then transitioning over to lab color. So when we're working with lab color, then we can get what's called the delta E distance. And the delta E distance allows us to generate a completely meaningless number that is just how far, if we had to draw a line in 3D space, we had to draw a 2D line in 3D space between two different colors, how long is that line? That's what we're trying to find. And delta E gives us the length of that line. And so what we can do is when we're trying to find a match for a specific color, then we can go through and we can calculate the delta E for every color in the library. And this actually isn't that expensive. And we can compare that to the generated complement color. So if we've got like a hex that we're trying to find, then we've got the complement hex on one hand, and we've got the entire library on the other. How do we find the color that matches most closely to the complement hex that we have? Well, we calculate the delta E for every color in the library. We compare that distance to or we compare that to the complement. We generate the distance for each one of those, and then we just take the shortest possible distance, and more often than not, we get the actual color that is closest to the pure generated hex. And just as a reminder, if you have tuned in late, what we're talking about is this value right here. Now, it does tend to fall apart a little bit when we get to the extremes, white and black, and that's just it's a part of life. It's actually pretty funny if we look at color combinations for things that are like solid white or close to white, because it's completely useless, really. This only helps when we've got real color in here. And the bolder the color, the better. Although I love using it on muted colors, because muted colors, it will find equally muted colors to match with. So when we're looking at something like this, it isn't super bold, the tetradic color here, but it does pop and it looks great together. And that's really what's important here. But when we're looking at generating the delta E, we take this hex and then we go through the entire library. We generate the delta E for every swatch in the library. And in this case, we end up with Paramount's Iron Red PLA, which is great considering this is also a Paramount filament. But the website actually determined that. And the reason that we search the entire library is because we want to make sure that it's not, or maybe it can be, a swatch that belongs to a different manufacturer. And that's something that we have to keep in mind. We have to be able to recognize that other manufacturers' filaments may be better, other different types of filament may be better, and that's what this does. So I'm going to pop back over to the code here, and we'll just kind of move down here. So each one of these just populates each individual color scheme for each color. And there's a lot of math for this. All of this is open source and it's on GitHub, so you are more than welcome to check it out if you want. This is just our refresh cache function. So we check to see when the last swatch was updated or uploaded. If the last time that we uploaded or updated the cache is greater than the last time that we uploaded a swatch, then we don't have to do anything and we're totally fine. And if it's not, if there's a new swatch has been introduced since the last time we updated the cache, then we go ahead and we populate everything. So we go through we can do a little bit more, like sending the tweet and other things like that. But there was something that I wanted to touch on that I remembered as I was going through this. Something that makes the generation code so powerful when we actually go through here and we're finding the closest color swatch. This is actually startlingly powerful. And that is because when we're looking at these swatches, it doesn't actually check the full library. What it does is it checks your library, and there's an important difference there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on settings real quick, And under settings, we have the 5 primary groups of filament that I want to display. And if we really want to get into it, then we can hide different manufacturers or show or hide different manufacturers. For example, if there's a manufacturer that you really don't like or you don't want to see in the listing, then you can just unclick their name here and it'll just go away. And it's kind of nice. But we do want to see unavailable filaments. So let's say that I'm working with atomic age TLPLA, but I only want ABS as my closest match. What I can do here, I can just deselect everything but ABS. I'm just going to go ahead and hide the advanced section, and I'll click Save Changes. Now, when I save this change, then what it will do is it generates a library specifically for me. It takes these settings, these are stored in your local setting in your cookies, and it's sent to the application. So the application receives my settings. It says, oh, I only want ABS. Then what it does, if you notice, it regenerated the closest match. So this is not saved in the cache. This was generated live for me for this specific viewing, and this is my closest ABS swatch. And the same thing here applies. So if I click on this, then I get sent, if I'm looking for ABS, well, that's not a perfect complement, but it's usually close enough. And if I click on more color combinations, you notice it regenerated all of these as well, just to match my restriction of only ABS. Now, I don't actually have that much ABS, so these results are not quite as good as they could be, but the fact remains that this change does happen. And this is generated live for me on every site load. This is generated live for everyone on every site load. Now, because my settings here say that I only want to see ABS, then this is what I see reflected in the library. I only have ABS here. And the same thing applies if I want to see, for example, only exotics. Now, I actually only have 3 things that I would categorize as exotic, but, my settings are not going to be super great there. But that's kind of what makes this so powerful, and what makes some of the things with selecting colors that you want and need so ridiculously cool. So one thing that I was going to touch on for the code was kind of what does developing locally look like. So I'm going to switch to this tab because this is actually, there we go. So this is actually the site that is running locally. Now, right now, I don't actually have it running. So let's go ahead and fix that. I'm just going to pop down here to my IDE. We're going to go ahead and see that we have an invalid syntax. Where the hell? Oh, there it is. Okay. And there we go. Okay, server starts. So I'm going to pop back over to my browser. We're going to refresh. So this is the development version of the site. This is running locally on my computer, and this is what I see the grand majority of the time when I'm working on the site. Like any reasonable, decent person, I try not to develop in production because really that's just a recipe for disaster. So this is what I'm working on. One of the questions I've gotten about kind of what does the site look like is, do I use a front-end framework? And the answer is no, I don't. I actually handwrite all of the CSS and all of the HTML that runs on this site. I use templating extensively as I'm working with this. And the reason for that is because I can get some absolutely crazy things out of this. So if I go over to my templates directory, for example, the library that we view when we're in the home, when we're at the home page, this is the entire code for the library. All of this, well, the grand majority of this is actually pulled in from other files, from other templates, and this is either automatically generated or it's generated on the fly. It's replaced with the appropriate thing, and we do a whole bunch of checks, like, checking to see if you're new here. If you've never been to the site, then we generate that little modal that appears at the top of the screen. It says, welcome to the site, here's how this works, blah, blah, blah. Now, some of this actually does get fairly complicated. So this is actually the swatch detail page that we link to on Twitter, which is why we have all of this meta information up here. But this is the raw HTML that actually powers the the filament detail page. And this kind of method, this kind of writing, some say that I'm nuts for actually doing this, but I prefer to be able to work with the code directly, and I prefer to be able to not have as much of this auto-generated as possible. I want to be able to control exactly how this looks and how this acts, because I'm looking for a specific thing. And the thing that I'm looking for, realistically, is mobile friendly. I don't develop for mobile first. That is something that you see a lot in, and something that you see a lot when you're working in kind of the mobile space is just, are you mobile first? Are you mobile second? Are you mobile whatever? Well, I'm mobile equal. So one of the things that I try and do is I want to make sure that the things that I work on look good on mobile. They function on mobile. So, for example, my my portrait view here allows for swiping. So if you're on mobile, then you can swipe between these images. You can use pinching to zoom in and actually see some of this detail. Things like the menu bar at the top automatically collapse, and they automatically make it so that you can interact with the site. Now these two buttons don't really work well on mobile, but I'm never using this on mobile. So if I go ahead and click log out, then those buttons go away and the menu bar looks good again. So we have browsing, we have all of this good stuff. And what I try and do is I try and work with with mobile in mind. Does this work on my phone? Does this work on the browser? And I have an extensive number of breakpoints where I check for this sort of thing, and I try and plan for this sort of thing. If you're savvy in web development, you will have totally caught the fact that most of this is Bootstrap. I actually am really old school in this case. I use Bootstrap and jQuery to power the entire website. There is nothing fancier in here than Bootstrap 4 and jQuery. All of the JavaScript I write by hand. Well, all of the JavaScript that is not a third-party library. So, for example, the ViewBox here, this is a third-party library called BaguetteBox that is amazing. But pretty much everything on here is actually handwritten. So, for example, the fly-in here, this is me, and the collection generation code is me, and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what makes this sucker run, why this works, how this works, all that good stuff. So there was one thing left that I wanted to show you, and I know that we're at 14:02, so we're a little bit over time, but that's okay. So I'm gonna pull up my regular camera again because I want to show you kind of what these look like. In real life, we've got all of these swatches. We've seen the close-up, the nitty-gritty. We know what these look like, but what do they actually look like? And if you haven't met me at Murph, or if you haven't met me in person where I've got these swatches, you may not actually know that these are really, really small. So this is actually one of my test rings. These are the swatches. They're not any bigger than this. When I photograph them, I'm putting each one of these in order in front of my camera rig, and this is exactly what I'm photographing. So we've got the front, we've got the back. Every single swatch is individually cataloged. There we go. We'll even turn that right side up for you. Every swatch is individually cataloged, and that's because I want to be able to find them afterwards if I need to rephotograph a swatch or something like that. I do actually have 3 individual rings, so this is kind of what I bring to show off to people as in terms of what these swatches can actually look like, and how they work, and what they look like when you've got them all organized. I can't take credit for putting them all together nicely like this. This is totally my partner, Aaliyah. She does an excellent job with this. But eventually, I kind of run out of space on the rings. I don't have any more place to put them, and so they end up in here. This is actually all of my overflow unsorted swatches. There are approximately 200, 300 swatches in here, and this is what my catalog looks like most of the time. So I've got my base swatch, and then every swatch is individually labeled on the back, although that is kind of hard to see. There we go. So every swatch is individually labeled, and this is kind of how the library ticks. What makes the library tick, what makes it important, what makes it feasible long term, and what makes it something that I can kind of take care of as the months go by. So that's really all I had. Thank you so much for joining in. I'm so sorry that we got started late. But if you have any questions or anything that you want to throw in a live chat, I'm happy to stick around for a little while and discuss different pieces, or discuss different parts of the system of the website and all that good stuff. So again, thank you so much for joining. I hope you had fun. And please do not forget that Slice Engineering's Virtual RepRap Festival, or VRF, is currently going on. It'll be happening through today until 5 p.m. EST, and tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. EST. And I will actually be online for the first part of tomorrow, so I will be on bright and early, 10 or 11, and that actually information is posted on Slice Engineering's Twitter. So, if you guys don't have any questions, then I'll go ahead and wrap. Altrissa writes, is the end goal to have every type of filament color brand in the library? And the answer is absolutely yes. I want to have as many colors and as many different types available as we possibly can, because that's the only way that we can help people make intelligent, informed decisions on the colors that they are wanting to buy. And I realize that there are not a whole lot of people who have the same reasons for buying filament that I do. I mean, not everyone hates painting as much as I do, but being able to have as many colors as we can enables other places to be able to view the colors and kind of see how they look like or what they look like in relation to other colors. My goal is to have as many colors as possible because I also know that a lot of filaments are really hard to get or they're just plain expensive. The most expensive filament that I have in the library is roughly $80 for 250 grams, and that is absolutely outside of the purchasing power of a lot of folks. And so I want to be able to provide them with the knowledge of what that's going to look like if they do end up deciding that they need to spring for that specific type of filament or um, that specific color or manufacturer or brand for their project. So yes, absolutely, that is my goal. In terms of contributing, if you would like to contribute, then I do have a donation section that I've added recently to the site. So actually, I can go ahead and pull that up real quick. On the site, we have this filament donation section up here. It lays out a process for being able to donate if you want. And I do have a small budget, not a big budget, but a small one, to assist with helping pay for shipping if you need assistance. I certainly can't pay a lot of people, and if I can't pay you this month, but you do need assistance, then I'm more than happy to pay for you next month. But I do have to stick to that $100 a month. So I take basically everything that I can print, and we also have a partnership with 3D Geeks app. Now, 3D Geeks app is a Thingiverse viewer that runs on Android primarily, I believe, and they are located in the Netherlands. So if you're in Europe and you want to more easily donate filament, you can ship to him. You want to make sure you reach out to him first to make sure that he knows that it's coming. But if you want to reach out to him, then you can ship locally, relatively locally, inside the EU or in just in that side of the world. And then when we get a sizable amount, then he'll ship me a large box, and we'll just go ahead and process all of them when I get them. So if you have a type of filament that I don't, and I specifically say type here because there are a lot of exotics, like real exotics, PEK, or things like that, that I cannot print. Like I can print some weird stuff, but I can't print the really high temperature stuff. And so if you've got something that we would consider to be an actual honest to God exotic, then you want to reach out to me first, make sure that I can process that. I do have the equipment, or I either have access to the equipment to process that. And if I do, I will absolutely do everything in my power to get it added because as I said, I want to have everything in the library that we can possibly have. I think that's really important. And we can only make it better for everyone if we contribute a little bit at a time. So as the library continues to grow, when I started this, I had about 80 colors that I had just purchased for myself or gotten through samples. And over time, it's grown to 450. Eventually, it will grow to even more. I mean, right now, I've got roughly another 25 that are already photographed and color balanced and ready to add. I just haven't actually gotten around to adding them yet. And then we've got another roughly 100 that are printed, ready to photograph. And then we've got an unknown number, probably somewhere around 100, 150, that are sitting in sample form that I have yet to print and categorize and catalog and all that good stuff. So I've got a lot of filaments in the pipeline. I pretty much always have filaments in the pipeline, but if you've got something that I don't have, please feel free to reach out. I will gladly check against the pipeline and against my stores and make sure that what you have is something that I don't, and then I would love to help facilitate getting it in so that I can print it and photograph it and catalog it and actually get it added, because that is the best way that we can grow the library. This is something that I do for free. This is something that I do kind of as a public service because I think it's important. It's a niche that is not filled. And if you really want relative color, if you want to be able to see what your color is going to look like against something else, there is no other system that presents it in the way that mine does. And I do want to specify in the way that mine does because there is another color system out there that deals primarily in real world color, which I find a lot more difficult to match properly, especially when you're looking at at printed colors and kind of how they're going to work together. If you want to take a look at Graybeard 3D's website, he has a color library that's actually much more extensive than mine because he's been at this for a little bit longer. But he specifically focuses on what is this color going to look like in the real world, whereas mine focuses primarily on what is this color going to look like compared to other colors that I will be printing. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for. If you have a real life object and you're saying, man, I love this color, I want to find a filament that either matches this or comes really close to it or looks good, then you're going to want to use his website. Again, that's Graybeard 3D. And if you've got a printed filament or you've got a printed project where you want to match a color there, then it's absolutely you're gonna be much more successful using my site, FilamentColors.XYZ, because that is kind of the goal of the site and what it's here for. So yeah, any other questions before we go ahead and wrap it up? I pretty much hit everything that was on my list. I think that there's so much of the website that I've been able to kind of play around with, and there's so much of the website that I think has been a real discovery process for me, because some of it is stuff that I've never been able to play with before. Some of it's stuff that I've always wanted to play with, and some of it's stuff that I looked at and I said, is this possible? I don't even know if this is possible. And that's how I got to the automated pulling of the colors, actually. It was because I looked at the site and I was like, there's no way that doing this manually is going to be tenable, so I should really figure out if I can do this automatically. And a lot of research later and some playing around, then I found out that it actually is totally possible to do it automatically. So I was able to implement that and get it working, which was super cool. Some things that I've tried with the site but was never able to get working simply because the technology doesn't exist or it doesn't work appropriately in the open source spectrum. The single biggest one there is automatic white balancing. Oh man, white balancing is so hard. That's why I actually do white balancing through Photoshop, because Photoshop, I believe the first version of Photoshop came out in either the very late 80s or the very early 90s. But Photoshop has been around for a really long time in various incarnations, and the folks who work on it are really, really good. Like, they understand images. You can't not understand images if you've been working with them for literally 30 years. So there is no open source package and there's no open source way to white balance images as cleanly and as well as Photoshop does. Unfortunately, there's no way around that. So if you try and auto white balance images, especially the images that I have, they either come out green or they come out yellow or they come out red. Either way, it never works right. And so, unfortunately, I do have to stick with some third-party tools in there. Photoshop will probably never be truly removed from the process, even though I was able to get automatic cropping working. So that as long as I have the swatch in the right place for the initial picture, everything else is just smooth sailing after I color balance it. So color balancing, white balancing, all of that stuff will probably have to be manual, at least for the foreseeable future, simply because technology hasn't caught up, and technology probably won't continue to catch up for a while, and it's unfortunate, but whatever. So I think that's really cool. The amount of color math that I had to learn is actually super, super interesting. There's a set of links that's on the website, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this up so that I can show you here. But there is a set of links on the website that show or give you more information about color balancing if you want to learn more about it, or just kind of sorting by color and all that good stuff. So we've got some resources that might be interesting. The single best resource is actually the one that appears in the library when you search by color. So we do have this opportunity to search by color here, and when you look at this in general, some of these will look out of order because automatic sorting by color is a very picky subject. Computers don't like to sort by color. They don't see color like we do. So, for example, we go from black to white to red, and then after we get through this, you can see as we scroll through that there is actually kind of a slow scheme to things. There's a theme to how these are laid out, and it's not a super clear theme, but there is a theme. We've got most of the colors in the right spot, and this is also automatically generated simply because I don't want to mess with putting these in the right place in the right order every time. We've got some more whites and some more blacks and a few like blues down here at the bottom, some purples, but in general, there is a layout to how this works. But the best resource that I've got here is by Alan Zucconi here. In 2015, he published this excellent article about color sorting and different color sorting methods and kind of what this looks like and why is it awful? Why is it a pain? If you just try and sort uh, if you just try and sort randomly, then it's not going to turn out too well. We use I believe we actually use HSV sorting, which is like it's okay. It gets us from point A to point B with a lot of detours. It's not super great. There are a lot of other sortings, but they would look very strange when we actually employ them on the site. Like we could make this really smooth, but it's really not going to look very good. And there are a lot of other different options for sorting color. But if you want to learn more about this, as I said, Alan Zucconi has a lot of really good resources. There are some more resources on the About page if you're interested in learning more. But that is that's kind of how that shakes out. So with that, I haven't gotten any more questions, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap. We are 15 minutes over, so thank you for sticking by me. If you had something to get to, I apologize if we made you run a little bit over, but we are at exactly an hour. So again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sticking with me, and thank you for asking questions. I really appreciate it. I hope this was interesting, and I hope this may have been educational. Maybe I showed you something new that you didn't know about the site, or showed you something new about kind of how this all works and how this functions together. So thank you very much, and have an excellent rest of your day. Again, don't forget about VRF. That's today and tomorrow, and there are a bunch of other live streams that are happening that are just not me. So this is the only one that I'm running on my own. I'll be participating in the VRF After Dark one tonight, and that's going to be at 7:30 EST, 6:30 Central Time. And I will be also participating in the official VRF live stream on Sunday, I believe at 10 or 11. And again, that's going to be on Slice Engineering's page. So thank you so much. Have an excellent rest of your day, and happy 3D printing. See you guys. Bye.